I'm glad to see you on my YouTube channel, where you'll hear stories from my life and the lives of those I've had the chance to meet. Before I begin one of my stories, I'll ask you to subscribe, hit the like button, and leave your opinion in the comments. This story will be about great disappointment, betrayal, and the brilliant mind of my son. I grabbed my phone and dialed her number. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. My heart wasn't just pounding. It was performing an interpretive drum solo of panic and betrayal. Andrew wandered in, munching an apple with the casual indifference only a 12-year-old could maintain while his father's world collapsed. The juxtaposition would have been comical if I weren't busy having an internal meltdown. "Where's Mom?" I asked, trying to sound normal, like I was asking about the weather and not the whereabouts of a woman who might have just financially eviscerated us. He shrugged, taking another bite. Said she had to go somewhere. Somewhere. The vagueness of that word felt like a slap. My hands trembled as I pulled up our joint credit card account, like a man opening a door he knows leads to a horror movie scene. The statement was a digital confession. Flights, luxury hotels, restaurants with names I couldn't pronounce. My wife was living la vida loca on the other side of the country, burning through our son's future like it was kindling for her midlife crisis. I tried to keep it together. Men don't cry over bank statements, right? But damn if my eyes weren't stinging as I stared at the screen, watching years of sacrifice turn into someone else's good time. Andrew must have sensed the nuclear meltdown brewing because he put his hand on my shoulder, a bizarrely adult gesture from a kid who still occasionally forgot to flush. "Dad, it's fine," he said with a smile that seemed too knowing, too calm. "I fixed everything." I nodded absently, assuming this was a child's attempt at comfort. Kids say things like that. They also say they want to be dinosaurs when they grow up. You don't take it literally. My focus was laser-locked on Vanessa. I tried calling again and again, but it was like shouting into the void. It wasn't until I checked her closet and found her expensive suitcase missing that reality truly sank in. She wasn't coming back. She had emptied our son's future, packed her Gucci bags, and waltzed out of our lives to the tune of whatever promises her new man had whispered. The anger came in waves, each one higher than the last. A tsunami of rage and humiliation. I was furious at her, but also at myself. How had I missed the signs? Was I really that oblivious, or just willfully blind? Every swipe of that credit card, every lie she told, played on repeat in my mind like the world's most depressing mixtape. Andrew stayed eerily quiet that evening, watching me with those calculating eyes that sometimes made me wonder if he was really a middle-aged accountant trapped in a pre-teen's body. When he finally went to bed, I sat alone in the dark, the blue glow of my laptop illuminating a face that had aged 10 years in one evening. I wish I could say I found clarity in that darkness, some profound realization or a plan forward. But all I found was the cold, bitter truth. The woman I'd built a life with had chosen someone else's bed over her family's welfare, and there was no undo button for that kind of betrayal. What I didn't know as I wallowed in self-pity was that Andrew wasn't just sleeping, he was plotting. And the solution brewing in his 12-year-old mind would make a spy thriller writer blush with inadequacy. The days after Vanessa's vanishing act were a blur of functional depression. I went to work, answered emails, attended meetings, and somehow managed not to scream "My wife stole our money and left me" during budget discussions. I was a zombie, in business casual, running on autopilot and bad coffee. But Andrew was a study in uncanny composure. While I was barely holding myself together with emotional duct tape, my son maintained his routine with robotic precision. School, homework, coding sessions, business as usual, as if his mother hadn't just performed a disappearing act worthy of Houdini. At first, I chalked it up to denial or shock. Preteens process trauma differently, right? That's what all the parenting blogs say, usually right after they tell you to feed your children organic kale and limit screen time to 14 seconds a day, while somehow also expecting them to become the next tech prodigy. But something was off. I'd catch Andrew typing furiously on his tablet, his face a mask of concentration, only to quickly switch screens when I walked by. "Just homework, Dad," he'd say with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I didn't question it. After all, he'd always been our little tech genius, the kid who could program the DVR while I was still trying to figure out which remote controlled the volume. Then came the whispered phone conversations. I caught him in the kitchen one evening, phone pressed, to his ear, speaking in hushed tones. "Who were you talking to?" I asked. He startled like he'd been caught stealing cookies. "Nobody," he said, pocketing the phone and scurrying away faster than a politician from a direct question. I didn't press. Maybe he was talking to a friend about his mom leaving. Maybe he'd joined a support group for kids with runaway parents. Maybe he was ordering pizza. Who knows? I was too exhausted to play detective. But then there was the parking lot. Our building had an underground parking area where each tenant had a small storage space. Andrew started spending hours down there, tinkering with something. I assumed. It was some engineering project, building robots or model planes. He'd always been good with his hands, a regular little Tony Stark minus the billions and the alcoholism. Curiosity finally got the better of me one night. I went down to check on him and found something that made my jaw hit the floor hard enough to leave a dent. The storage space looked like a miniature CIA headquarters. There was a whiteboard covered in what looked like complex diagrams and mathematical equations. A laptop displayed scrolling code that might as well have been hieroglyphics to me. And Andrew, my 12-year-old son, was soldering what appeared to be some kind of electronic device with the focus of a brain surgeon. When he saw me, he jumped up like he'd been electrocuted, trying to block the whiteboard with his small frame. "What's all this?" I asked, genuinely bewildered. "Nothing, Dad. Just a school project," he said with all the conviction of a dog claiming it didn't. "Eat the birthday cake? A school project? Since when does 4th grade require—" I squinted at the device in his hand. "What appears to be surveillance equipment." His face flushed red. For a moment I thought he might come clean. Instead, he just shrugged and said, "You wouldn't understand," in a tone that made me feel like I was the child in this relationship. As the days passed, his behavior grew increasingly suspicious. He started asking oddly specific questions about Vanessa's finances. Did she have other accounts? What passwords did she use? Had she ever mentioned offshore investments? "Why do you want to know all this?" I finally asked. He shrugged, not looking up from his tablet. "Just curious." "Andrew," I said, trying to sound firm, despite feeling like I was losing my grip on reality. "This isn't normal behavior. If something's bothering you, you need to talk to me." He finally looked up, his eyes holding a determination that was almost unnerving. "I told you, Dad, I'm fixing it. You'll see." That night, sleep eluded me. Andrew's words echoed in my mind. Fixing it. What could a 12-year-old possibly fix about this adult-sized catastrophe? The next morning I found him in the kitchen, fingers flying across his laptop keyboard with a speed and confidence that seemed almost supernatural for someone whose age was still in single digits. "Andrew?" I said softly, and he froze like a deer in headlights. "Yeah, Dad?" I wanted to demand answers, to assert some parental authority and get to the bottom of whatever he was doing. Instead, I heard myself say, "Breakfast is ready," and retreated like the coward I apparently was. In retrospect, I should have pushed harder. I should have sat him down and extracted the truth, even if I had to bribe him with ice cream and extended bedtimes. But part of me was afraid of what I might discover. Sometimes ignorance isn't just bliss. It's self-preservation. Over the next few days, Andrew went full Jason Bourne. He password-protected his devices, locked the storage room when he was working, and even covered his mysterious whiteboard with a sheet when not in use. If he'd started wearing sunglasses indoors and referring to himself by a code name, I wouldn't have been surprised. And then, just as I was beginning to think I was overreacting, Vanessa called. It was late afternoon. I was standing by the sink, staring vacantly out the window at a world that continued to turn despite my personal apocalypse. Andrew was in the living room, his face glued to his tablet as usual. My phone rang. Vanessa's name flashed on the screen. and my heart performed a gymnastics routine that would have scored a perfect 10 at the Olympics. My first instinct was to ignore it. What could she possibly say that would undo what she'd done? But curiosity is a powerful drug, and I was an addict in withdrawal. What do you want? My voice came out cold enough to freeze lava. John, she sobbed, her voice frantic and trembling. Oh my God, John, you have to help me. The audacity of her request made me laugh. A sharp, humorless sound. Help you? You emptied our son's college fund and ran off with your boyfriend. Why on earth would I help you? John, please, she begged, her voice breaking. Everything's gone wrong. It's all falling apart. Despite my resolve to remain icy, curiosity prickled. What are you talking about? It's Harry, she said, almost hyperventilating. He's gone? Disappeared? All our accounts are frozen? The police are asking questions? I can't access anything, John. Not a penny. And now the police are looking for me, too. A twisted satisfaction curled inside me. Not sympathy, but a dark, vengeful pleasure. How does it feel, Vanessa, to be abandoned and penniless? To have the rug pulled out from under you? John, please, she continued, desperation climbing. I don't know what's happening. I don't know who did this. I need your help. I'm stuck in Palm Beach with no money, no ID, nothing. Harry promised he'd handle everything, and now he's just gone. Sounds like a stand-up guy, I said dryly. Real Prince Charming material. She didn't even register my sarcasm, too caught up in her own drama. I swear, John, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. You just what, Vanessa? My temper finally snapped like a rubber band stretched too far. You just accidentally emptied our son's college fund? Accidentally packed your bags? Accidentally hopped on a plane with another man? Please, enlighten me about which part of betraying. Your family was unintentional. There was a pause, filled only by her ragged breathing. Remember how Mom cleaned out my college fund? He began, his voice steady as a surgeon's hand. Well, I figured if she could take it, I could take it back. He pulled up a series of bank transactions, and my jaw nearly detached itself from my face. The $50,000 Vanessa had stolen was back in the account, not just sitting there, but apparently reorganized and invested in some complicated portfolio that made my eyes cross. How did you? I stammered, feeling like I just walked into an episode of Mr. Robot starring a fourth grader. Easy, he said with unsettling nonchalance. Mom uses the same password for everything. My birthday backwards plus her favorite flower. Amateur hour, really. I accessed her accounts and Harry's too. He wasn't any smarter. Once I was in, I just transferred everything back where it belonged. That's illegal, I said feebly, though even to my own ears, I sounded like a substitute teacher, half-heartedly telling kids not to run in the halls. He shrugged again. So is stealing from your kid. Touché. I couldn't argue with that logic, but my unease deepened as he continued scrolling. The bank transfers, it seemed, were just the opening act in Andrew's revenge symphony. Harry had multiple accounts, he explained, pointing to complex diagrams on the screen. Turns out he's been running investment scams for years. Fake portfolios, shell companies, the works. I found everything and reported it all to the authorities, anonymously, of course. Gave them all the evidence they need to put him away for a long, long time. You reported him to the police? I asked, my voice barely. Above a whisper, FBI, actually, he corrected, as casually as if he were telling me he'd ordered pizza. Financial crimes are federal, and yes, I made sure the trail led back to Mom, too. He added this last part with a small smirk that sent chills down my spine. She helped him spend the stolen money, so technically she's an accessory. The feds are watching her now. Andrew, I said, my voice rising with alarm. Do you understand what you've done? This isn't just about getting our money back. You've put your mother in serious legal jeopardy. She put herself there, he shot back, his voice suddenly sharp. She chose Harry over us. She chose herself over her family. Why should I protect her from the consequences of her own actions? I had no answer. He was right, of course. Vanessa had betrayed us in the worst possible way. But hearing these cold, calculated words from my son, delivered with the detached precision of a hitman discussing a contract, made my blood run cold. "And Harry?" I asked, dreading the answer. "What did you mean when you said he won't be around anymore?" Andrew's lips curved into a smile that belonged on a much older, much more dangerous face. "Don't worry, Dad. I didn't have him whacked or anything. He's alive, for now. I just made sure he has no money and nowhere to hide. The feds froze all his assets. By the time they catch up to him, he'll be broke and facing about 30 years in federal prison." The casual way he discussed destroying a man's life, as if he were describing how to beat a video game level, sent a shiver through me. "Andrew," I said carefully, "why didn't you tell me about any of this? Why didn't you let me handle it?" His expression softened slightly, and for a moment I caught a glimpse of the little boy behind the mastermind. "Because you wouldn't have done anything, Dad. You'd have let her get away with it because you're too nice. Someone had to stop her. Someone had to protect us. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My son, my sweet, brilliant, terrifying son, had taken it upon himself to not just recover our losses but to exact a revenge so complete, so devastating, that it made my adult anger seem childish by comparison." "Andrew," I said after a long pause, "I'm not sure this was the right way to handle things." He tilted his head, regarding me with those calculating eyes. "Maybe not, but it worked." I leaned back, running a hand through my hair. I didn't know what to say or how to feel. My 12-year-old had done what I couldn't. He'd taken control of a hopeless situation and turned it around. But at what cost? What does it do to a child's soul to execute such cold vengeance? Andrew closed his tablet and patted my knee with surprising gentleness. "Don't worry, Dad. Everything's going to be okay now." But as I sat there, looking at this small person who suddenly seemed like a stranger, I couldn't shake the feeling that nothing about this was okay, not even close. Sleep became my white whale that night, constantly pursued, never captured. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying Andrew's revelations on an endless loop. My 12-year-old son had engineered a scheme so intricate, so devastating that it would make a seasoned con artist weep with envy. And the worst part, he showed about as much remorse as someone who'd swatted a fly. The next morning the phone rang again. "Vanessa, again." I almost didn't answer. What was left to say? But some masochistic part of me wanted to hear her squirm. So I picked up. "What?" I barked, skipping the pleasantries. "John," she sobbed, her voice now completely unrecognizable. Gone was the confident woman who'd once organized our entire lives with military precision. In her place was someone broken, desperate. "Please, I need your help. I'm begging you." "You've got some nerve," I said, ice in every syllable. "John, listen to me," she rushed on, words tumbling over each other in panic. "The police came to my hotel room. They're investigating me for fraud. They've frozen everything, my credit cards, my accounts. Harry's disappeared completely. I don't know where he is, and I have nowhere to go." "And whose fault is that?" I asked, enjoying this more than I probably should have. "John, please," she cried. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you both terribly, but this is extreme." "I don't deserve to be left with nothing," I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "You emptied our son's college fund, ran off with a con man, and now you're surprised there are consequences. You do deserve this, Vanessa, every last bit of it." There was silence, punctuated only by her ragged breathing. I didn't think it would end like this," she whispered. "You didn't think at all," I replied. "You were too busy living your fantasy to care about what, or who, you left behind. Well, guess what? You made your choices. Now you get to live with them." She began sobbing then, loud, ugly, desperate sobs that once might have moved me to comfort her. Now they left me cold. "John, I'm begging you," she pleaded between gasps. "Help me get out of this mess. I don't have anyone else to turn to." My jaw clenched. The audacity. After everything she'd done, she had the nerve to act like a victim? Like I owed her something? "There's nothing I can do for you," I said flatly. "Don't say that," she begged. "You could talk to the police. Tell them I wasn't involved in Harry's schemes. Tell them I didn't know." "Because lying for you worked out so well before?" I snapped. "No, Vanessa. I'm done cleaning up your messes." "John, please," she shouted, her voice breaking. "If not for me, then for Andrew. Do it for your son." That was it, the match that lit my fuse. "Don't you dare bring Andrew into this," I growled, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You don't get to play the concerned mother card now, not after what you did to him. You made it crystal clear where your priorities lie, and they weren't with this family." "John, I'm sorry," she cried. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I just wanted to be happy." "Happy?" I repeated, incredulous. "You thought stealing from your son and running off with a fraud would make you happy? Congratulations, Vanessa. Hope it was worth it." There was a long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was small, defeated. "Is this really how it's going? To end? You're just going to abandon me?" The irony was so thick you could spread it on toast. "You abandoned us first," I said simply. "And no, I'm not abandoning you. I'm just letting you face the consequences of your own actions. Goodbye, Vanessa." I hung up before she could respond. When I turned around, Andrew was standing in the doorway, watching me with that unsettling calmness. "You didn't cave," he observed, something like approval in his voice. "No," I said, suddenly exhausted. "I didn't." He nodded once, satisfied. "Good. She doesn't deserve our help." I wanted to explain to him that it wasn't that simple, that forgiveness and compassion were important values, even for those who hurt us. But looking at him, at the cold certainty, in his young eyes, I knew he wouldn't understand. Or worse, maybe he would. And that's what frightened me most. "Andrew," I said carefully, "what you did, how you're thinking, it's not normal for someone your age. This isn't how 12-year-olds are supposed to process things." "I'm not a normal 12-year-old," he replied with simple conviction. I had no counter for that. The days following Vanessa's second call were tense. I kept expecting the other shoe to drop, and it did, with the force of a piano falling from a skyscraper. It started with a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered, half expecting it to be the police. "John," a male voice growled, low and menacing. "You think you're clever, don't you?" I froze. I'd never met Harry, but I knew instantly who was on the line. "Harry," I said flatly, "shouldn't you be in hiding by now?" He laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "Oh, I'm hiding all right, thanks to you and your little brat. You think you can destroy my life and just walk away?" I glanced toward the living room where Andrew was calmly assembling a model rocket as if nothing in the world could touch him. For a moment, I considered playing dumb. But what was the point? Harry obviously knew. "You got exactly what you deserved," I said evenly. "You stole from my family. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences?" "You have no idea who you're dealing with," he snarled. "You think this is over? I'm just getting started." "What are you going to do, Harry?" I asked, my patience wearing thin. "You're broke. You're wanted by the FBI. You're finished." "Maybe," he said, his voice dropping to a chilling calm. "But I'm not going down alone. I know where you live, John. I know where your son goes to school. And if you think I'm just going to roll over while you ruin everything I've built, you're dead wrong." My blood turned to slush. He wasn't bluffing. I'd never met the man, but something in his voice told me he wasn't the type to make empty threats. "You, stay away from my son," I said, my voice shaking despite my best efforts. "Or what?" he taunted. "You'll have your little computer genius come after me again? Go ahead. Let's see how far he's willing to go." I hung up, my hands trembling so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I stood there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened, trying to formulate a plan. Who was that? Andrew asked from behind me, making me jump. "Harry," I said, turning to face him. "He knows what you did, and now he's threatening us." I expected fear, panic, the normal reaction of a child who'd just been threatened by a dangerous adult. Instead, Andrew's expression never changed. "Let him try," he said, his voice so cold it could have frozen fire. "Andrew, this isn't one of your video games," I said, kneeling down to his level. "This man is dangerous. We need to call the police." "No," he cut me off, his voice suddenly firm. "The police won't do anything until it's too late, but I can handle this. Andrew." "Dad?" he interrupted again, looking me directly in the eyes. "Trust me. I've got this." I wanted to argue, to tell him that this wasn't his responsibility, that he was just a kid and shouldn't have to deal with these adult problems. But the look in his eyes stopped me. It wasn't the look of a child. It was the look of someone who'd already seen too much, who'd been forced to grow up too fast. That night, Andrew disappeared into the parking lot again, locking the storage room behind him. I should have stopped him, should have dragged him back upstairs and forbidden whatever he was planning. Instead, I paced our apartment, jumping at every sound, replaying Harry's threats in my mind until I felt sick. It wasn't until well after midnight that Andrew finally emerged. He looked tired but oddly satisfied, like a general who'd just finalized battle plans. "It's done," he said simply. "What's done?" I asked, dread pooling in my stomach. He handed me his tablet, and what I saw made my blood pressure spike to dangerous levels. He'd tracked Harry's location using some advanced GPS software. He'd hacked into Harry's burner phone and recorded every threat. And then, as if that weren't enough, he'd sent everything, including evidence of Harry's financial crimes, to the FBI, anonymously tipping them to his exact location. "Andrew," I whispered, torn between horror and awe, "do you have any idea what you've just done?" "I stopped him," he replied matter-of-factly. "He can't hurt us now." I wanted to believe him. God, how I wanted to believe that this nightmare was over, that we were safe, but life had recently taught me that nothing is ever that simple. Sure enough, 4 days later, I woke to the sound of breaking glass. Someone had thrown a brick through our living room window. Attached to it was a note, scrawled in jagged, angry handwriting. "This isn't over. Andrew found it before I did. He read it, crumpled it up, and tossed it in the trash without a word." "Andrew," I said, fear making my voice shake, "we need to leave. Go somewhere safe until this blows over." He looked up at me, his expression calm and untroubled, as if someone hadn't just declared war on our family. "We don't need to run, Dad. I have one more move to make." "What do you mean, one more move?" I asked, my heart racing. He smiled then, a small, chilling smile that would have looked more at home on a movie villain than on my son's face. "You'll see." The next 4 days were the longest of my life. Every car that drove by too slowly, every person who lingered near our building, every unexpected noise sent my anxiety spiraling. I suggested calling the police at least a dozen times, but Andrew remained adamant. He would handle it. Meanwhile, he went about his days like nothing was wrong. School, homework, his normal routine. All while I was a nervous wreck, constantly, looking over my shoulder, sleeping with a baseball bat beside my bed. I didn't dare ask what he was planning. Part of me didn't want to know. I told myself that if I stayed ignorant, maybe I wouldn't be an accessory to whatever a 12-year-old computer prodigy could come up with. Then, on the 4th day, it happened. It was late afternoon when the doorbell rang. My stomach dropped to my knees. We weren't expecting anyone, and after the brick incident, unexpected visitors seemed like a very bad idea. "Don't answer it," I whispered, fear sharpening my voice to a hiss. Andrew didn't even acknowledge my words. He simply stood up, walked to the door, and peered through the peephole with the calm curiosity of someone checking the weather. Then, to my absolute horror, he unlocked the door and swung it open. Standing there, looking like he'd just crawled out of a particularly nasty sewer, was Harry. His designer clothes were rumpled. his eyes bloodshot and wild, his once slick appearance now as disheveled as a scarecrow in a hurricane. He looked nothing like the suave conman from the photos Vanessa had accidentally left behind. This Harry was a desperate animal, cornered and dangerous. "Where's the little bastard?" Harry growled, stepping into our doorway uninvited. I moved, to block his path, adrenaline temporarily overriding my terror. "You need to leave," I said, trying to sound authoritative while my knees knocked together like castanets. Harry's laugh sounded like gravel in a blender. "Oh, I'm not going anywhere until your brat explains how he systematically destroyed my life." He looked past me, eyes narrowing when he spotted Andrew. "There you are, you little digital terrorist." To my absolute horror, Andrew stepped forward, looking about as intimidated as someone facing an aggressive chihuahua. He crossed his arms and regarded Harry with a bored expression that would have been comical in any other situation. "You did that all by yourself," Andrew said, his voice eerily level for a child facing a grown man who clearly wanted to fold him into origami. Harry's jaw clenched so hard I could practically hear his teeth cracking. "Listen, you little—" "You're broke," Andrew interrupted, his tone sharp as a scalpel. "You're wanted in 3 states for fraud. The IRS has enough on you to put you away until the next ice age. And your brilliant move is to show up at our door and make threats? I've seen smarter decisions in cartoon characters." I reached for Andrew, intending to pull him behind me, but he shrugged off my hand like an irritating fly. "Andrew, stop," I whispered. But he ignored me completely, stepping closer to Harry with the confidence of someone who knew exactly how this confrontation would end. "You shouldn't have come here," Andrew continued, his voice taking on a coldness that sent chills down my spine. "You're only making things worse for yourself," Harry barked out a laugh that contained zero actual humor. "Worse? Kid, I've got nothing left to lose thanks to you. My accounts are frozen, my contacts won't touch me. I'm sleeping in my car. How exactly could things get worse?" Andrew's lips curled into a smile that would have looked more appropriate on a shark. "That's where you're wrong." Before I could process what was happening, Andrew pulled something from his pocket. A small device that looked like it had been cobbled together from spare parts in our storage unit. He pressed a button, and suddenly Harry's phone buzzed in, his pocket. Harry frowned, pulling it out to see the screen lighting up with a cascade of files. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, confusion battling with alarm on his face. "Evidence," Andrew said simply. Harry's eyes widened as he scrolled through whatever was appearing on his screen. "You little—" "That's everything," Andrew cut him off. "Every threat you've made, every call, every text, your current location, your movements for the past 4 days. And it's not just on your phone. It's being streamed live to the FBI, local police, and, oh, just for fun, that private investigator hired by the 3 ex-wives you've been dodging alimony payments to." I watched in real time as Harry's face transformed, from confusion to horrified understanding. In that moment, I realized what Andrew had done. This wasn't just about gathering evidence. It was a trap. Harry's phone wasn't just receiving files. It was broadcasting his location and everything he said. "You're bluffing," Harry said, but his voice lacked conviction. Andrew tilted his head slightly, the gesture somehow more threatening than any adult, posturing. "Am I?" As if on cue, the wail of sirens pierced the air, growing rapidly louder. Blue and red lights began to flash against our walls, reflecting through the windows. Harry lunged forward with the desperate rage of a man with nothing to lose. My heart stopped. He was going to hurt my son, my brilliant, terrifying son. But before he could take another step, the sirens reached their crescendo. Andrew didn't even flinch. "That'll be for you," he said with a calm that was frankly disturbing. Harry froze, his head whipping toward the window where police lights now painted our living room in emergency colors. When he turned back to us, his face had transformed into a mask of pure hatred. "This isn't over," he spat. "Actually," Andrew replied, his voice cold and final, "it is. The police didn't bother with niceties. They burst through our still open door with guns drawn, shouting commands that Harry had no choice but to obey. As they handcuffed him and led him away, I stood rooted to the spot, trying to process what I'd just witnessed. When the chaos finally subsided and the police had taken Harry away, after a surprisingly brief conversation with Andrew that I was too shocked to follow, I turned to my son. "Andrew," I said, my voice shaking, "do you have any idea how dangerous that was? He could have hurt you. He could have hurt both of us." "But he didn't," Andrew replied with that same matter-of-fact tone that was beginning to haunt my nightmares. "And now he's gone." I wanted to yell at him, to ground him until college, to make him understand that what he'd done wasn't normal or acceptable. But as I looked at this small person who had somehow outmaneuvered a grown criminal at his own game, all I could do was stare in stunned silence. Andrew glanced up at me, and for the first time, I noticed the tiredness in his eyes. "It's over, Dad," he said softly. "We're safe now." But as I stood there, watching the police car disappear down the street with Harry in the back, I couldn't shake the feeling that safe was the last thing we were. The apartment fell into an eerie quiet after Harry's arrest. The looming threats, the constant fear, the looking over our shoulders tension, all of it seemed to evaporate overnight. But the silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy and oppressive, like the air before a storm. I thought that would be the end of it. Harry was in custody. Andrew had gone back to playing video games and doing homework as if orchestrating the downfall of two adults was just another item checked off his to-do list, and I was trying to piece together what remained of our normal, a life. Then Vanessa called again. I recognized the number, not her usual one, which I'd blocked, but a new one she'd apparently acquired. I considered ignoring it, but curiosity won out. What fresh drama could she possibly bring to our doorstep now? "What now, Vanessa?" I answered, my tone frostier than a penguin's patio. Her voice was almost unrecognizable, raspy and hollow, like she'd been crying for days or developing a promising career as a chain smoker. "John," she began, but then faltered, words seeming to fail her. "I don't have time for dramatic pauses," I snapped. "If you're calling to beg for money or forgiveness, you're wasting your minutes." "I don't want your money," she said quietly, which might have been the most shocking thing she'd said since this nightmare began. I don't even know what I want anymore." That threw me. In the decade I'd known Vanessa, she'd always known exactly what she wanted, and how to get it. This uncertain, broken-sounding person was a stranger. "Then why are you calling?" I asked, softening my tone despite my better judgment. "In serious trouble, John," she admitted, her voice trembling. "The kind that comes with jumpsuits and bars. Let me guess, the feds caught up with you?" I couldn't keep the satisfaction from my voice. She ignored my tone. "They're investigating me as an accomplice to Harry's schemes. They think I knew what he was doing all along." "And did you?" I asked, letting the question hang in the air like a guillotine blade. There was a hesitation, which was answer enough. "Not at first," she finally said. "I swear, John, but by the time I figured it out, I was already in too deep, and now they're freezing everything, seizing assets. I literally have nothing. Not even a change of clothes that isn't in police evidence bags." "Welcome to the club," I replied dryly. "Though at least I still had my underwear when you left. You took even our son's future." "I was stupid," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I thought Harry loved me. I thought he'd take care of me, that we'd have this amazing life together." Couldn't help but laugh, a short, bitter sound. "And how's that fairy tale working out for you? Prince Charming living up to expectations?" She didn't respond immediately. The silence on the line spoke volumes about just how spectacularly her fantasy had imploded. "Why are you really calling, Vanessa?" I asked, genuinely curious now. "Because you and Andrew are all I have left," she said quietly, the words clearly costing her considerable pride. If she'd physically reached through the phone and slapped me, I couldn't have been more stunned. The sheer audacity, the delusional entitlement of that statement left me momentarily speechless. When I found my voice, it was steady and cold. "We're not yours, Vanessa. You lost us the moment you chose that con man over your family." "John, please," she begged, her voice cracking. "I made a terrible mistake. I know that now. But I'm still Andrew's mother. I need another chance." "Another chance?" I repeated, incredulous. "This wasn't some minor slip-up, Vanessa. You didn't forget our anniversary or burn dinner. You stole from your own child. You abandoned him for a man you barely knew. And now that your house of cards has collapsed, you think you can just waltz back into our lives? No, absolutely not." Her sobs carried through the phone, but they bounced off my hardened heart without leaving a dent. Once those tears would have devastated me, would have had me rushing to fix whatever was making her cry. Now, they seemed as artificial as everything else about her. "I have nowhere else to go," she said between shuddering breaths. "That sounds like a personal problem," I replied coldly. "But what about Andrew?" she asked, pulling out the mother card again. "Doesn't he deserve to have his mother in his life?" That was rich, coming from her. "Andrew doesn't need you," I said bluntly. "He's smarter, stronger, and frankly more adult than either of us. He's done just fine without you, and he'll continue to do so." The line went quiet. For a moment I thought she'd hung up, but then she spoke, her voice barely audible. "So that's it? After everything we've been through, you're just going to turn your back on me?" The irony was so thick you could cut it with a chainsaw. "You turned your back on us first," I reminded her, "and you didn't just walk away. You robbed us blind on your way out. Consider this karma coming full circle." She had no response to that. I heard her ragged breathing, and then the call disconnected. When I turned around, Andrew was standing in the doorway, silent as a ghost. I wondered how long he'd been there, how much he'd heard. "Mom again?" he asked, though it wasn't really a question. I nodded. She wanted to come back. Andrew's expression didn't change. "Did you tell her no?" I did. He nodded once, satisfied. "Good. She doesn't deserve another chance." I wanted to give him some parental wisdom about forgiveness and second chances, about how sometimes people make terrible mistakes but can still change. But looking at his composed, certain face, I couldn't bring myself to say the words. Maybe he was right. Maybe some betrayals are simply unforgivable. In the days that followed, I found myself watching Andrew with new eyes. I'd always known he was smart, gifted, his teachers called him, but I'd never fully grasped just how extraordinary his mind was until I'd seen it in action. It was impossible not to marvel at what he'd accomplished, outsmarting adults at their own games, recovering stolen money, bringing down a criminal, all while maintaining the outward appearance of a normal fourth grader. It was impressive, remarkable, even, and absolutely terrifying. Because Andrew didn't act like a child should. He didn't process emotions like other kids his age, where there should have been fear, hurt, confusion, normal reactions to his mother's abandonment. There was only cold calculation and ruthless efficiency. It was as if he'd approached the whole catastrophe as an interesting logic problem rather than a devastating personal trauma. One evening, as I sat on the couch staring at the now-repaired window and wondering if I should install a security system, or perhaps a moat with alligators, Andrew came and sat beside me. He had that same calm, slightly detached expression he always wore these days, but there was something different in his eyes, something heavier, almost uncertain. "Dad," he said, quietly. "Are you mad at me?" The question caught me off guard. "Mad at you? For what?" "For everything I did," he said simply. "For going after Mom and Harry. For not telling you what I was planning." I sighed, running a hand through my hair, which had probably gained a few more gray strands in the past couple of weeks. How could I possibly answer that? How could I explain the complicated mix of awe, pride, gratitude, and absolute terror that his actions had inspired? "Andrew," I began carefully, what you did, it wasn't something a 12-year-old should have had to do. It wasn't something anyone should have to do. But I did it, he said, his tone matter of fact. And it worked. It did, I conceded. But success isn't the only measure of whether something was right or wrong. I'm concerned about what all this has done to you inside. He frowned, genuinely confused. What do you mean? I searched for the right words, treading carefully. The way you handled everything, it wasn't normal, Andrew. It wasn't healthy. You shouldn't have to think the way you've been thinking, act the way you've been acting. You're just a kid. You should be worried about video game levels and science projects, not orchestrating elaborate revenge schemes against adults. His expression didn't change. I did what needed to be done, he said with unnerving conviction. If I hadn't stepped in, who would have stopped them? Who would have protected us? The question hit me like a physical blow. Because he was right. I had been useless in the face of crisis, paralyzed by shock, grief, and betrayal. While I'd been wallowing in self-pity, my 12-year-old had stepped up and handled the situation with more effectiveness than I could have managed on my best day. And that realization was a bitter pill to swallow. You're incredibly smart, Andrew, I said after a long pause. Smarter than I'll ever be. But you're still my son, and it's supposed to be my job to protect you, not the other way around. He looked at me then, his eyes searching mine with an intensity that seemed to belong to someone much older. But what if you can't? He asked softly. What if sometimes it has to be me? I had no answer for that. How could I, when the evidence of my own inadequacy was staring me in the face? Andrew had protected us both. He'd saved us. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the cost had been far too high. Life gradually returned to a semblance of normalcy over the next few weeks. Harry remained in custody, facing a laundry list of charges that would likely keep him behind bars until Andrew had grandchildren. Vanessa had gone silent, perhaps finally accepting that the bridge back to us had not just been burned, but obliterated on a molecular level. The apartment was quiet, peaceful even, though that peace felt fragile, like thin ice over deep water. One afternoon, I found Andrew in the parking lot storage area, working on a new project. It was a drone, I realized, a surprisingly sophisticated one, with wires and circuit boards laid out in precise patterns that made absolutely no sense to my technologically challenged brain. He looked up when I entered, offering a small smile that almost reached his eyes. Hey, Dad. I leaned against the doorframe, watching him work. You're always building something, aren't you? He shrugged, returning to his soldering. I like it. Keeps my mind busy. That's good, I said carefully, approaching the subject that had been weighing on me. But Andrew, you don't always have to be fixing things. Sometimes it's okay to just let things be. He didn't respond right away, focusing intently on connecting a tiny wire with surgical precision. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, but firm. I don't know how to do that. What do you mean? He set down his tools and looked up at me, his expression serious beyond his years. I don't know how to just let things be, Dad. If something's broken, I have to fix it. If there's a problem, I have to solve it. That's just how my brain works. I wanted to tell him that he didn't need to carry the weight of the world on his small shoulders, that it wasn't his responsibility to fix every broken thing. But I knew better now. Andrew wasn't like other children. He saw the world differently, processed it differently, and no amount of parental reassurance would change the fundamental way his mind operated. You have an incredible gift, I said finally. But gifts come with responsibility. As you grow up, you'll have to decide how to use that brilliant mind of yours and who to trust with it. He nodded, his eyes thoughtful. I know. I watched him for a moment longer, my chest tight with a conflicting mixture of pride and worry. My son was extraordinary, no question about it, but his brilliance was a double-edged sword that could cut in any direction. It could build or destroy, heal or harm, and I could only hope that as he grew, he would choose to use his powers for good. That night, Lying in bed, I remembered something Vanessa had said during our last conversation. Words I dismissed at the time as manipulation. You've raised a son who doesn't just survive, John, he conquers. But be careful. One day his heart might be too cold to save. I didn't want to believe her. I didn't want to think that my sweet, brilliant boy could ever become something dangerous. But after everything I'd witnessed, I couldn't completely dismiss the possibility either. Andrew wasn't just a survivor. He was a force of nature. And while I was immensely proud of him, I couldn't shake the nagging fear that his unchecked brilliance might one day lead him down a path from which there was no return. For now, though, we had peace. A fragile, imperfect peace. And I was determined to protect it for both our sakes. Because that's what fathers do. Even when they're 12-year-old, sons are better at it than they are.